Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessing of Allah be upon him, is the founder of Islam. He was born 571 AD on the day of 12 Rabi'ul Awal of the Islamic calendar in Mecca, now the city of Saudi Arabia. His father is Hazrat Abdullah bin Abdul Muttalib. His father died before his birth, and his mother, Hazrat Amina bint Wahb, died when he was childhood. After the death of parents, his grandfather, Hazrat Abdul Muttalib, brought up. After the death of his grandfather, his uncle Hazrat Abu Talib brought up. As a young boy, he travelled with his uncle in the caravan of merchants to Syria, and some years afterwards made the same journey in the service of a wealthy named Khadija. So faithfully did he transact the business of Khadija, and so excellent was the report of his behaviour, which she received from her servant who had accompanied him. After this, Hazrat Khadija sent a marriage proposal to Prophet Hazrat Muhammad, peace and blessing of Allah be upon him. Prophet Hazrat Muhammad, peace and blessing of Allah be upon him, accepted the proposal of marriage, and the age of Prophet Hazrat Muhammad, peace and blessing of Allah be upon him, was 25 years old, and age of Hazrat Khadija was 40 years old. Before the revelation of Islam, Prophet Hazrat Muhammad, peace and blessing of Allah be upon him, was called by the titles of Sadiq and Amin. Prophet Hazrat Muhammad, peace and blessing of Allah be upon him, mostly went to cave Hira, in a mountain called Mountain of Light not far from Makkah for prayer. When he was 40 years old, the first revelation revealed from Allah to Prophet Hazrat Muhammad, peace and blessing of Allah be upon him, of some lines of Surah Mudassir in cave Hira. Angel Hazrat Jibril came in the cave and said, "Read, Prophet." Hazrat Muhammad, peace and blessing of Allah be upon him, replied, "I cannot read." The voice of again said, "Read, Prophet Hazrat Muhammad, peace and blessing of Allah be upon him," again replied, "I cannot read." At the third time, the voice, more terrible, commanded, "Read, Prophet Hazrat Muhammad, peace and blessing of Allah be upon him," said, "What can I read?" The voice said, "Read in the name of Lord who createth man from clot. Read, and it is the Lord the most bountiful, who teacheth by the pen, teacheth man that which he knew not. The cave Hira in the mountain of light, Jabal al-Nur." He went out the cave onto the hillside and heard the same awe-inspiring voice say, "O Muhammad, thou alert messenger of Allah, and I am Jibril." Then he raised his eyes and saw the angel. Prophet Hazrat Muhammad, peace and blessing of Allah be upon him, returned in great distress of mind to this wife Hazrat Khadija and narrated the whole incident. She took him to her cousin Waqa bin Nawfal, who knew the scriptures of the Jews and Christians. He said, "It was the same that revealed on Hazrat Musa and Hazrat Isa." He said, "Allah chose you as Prophet of Allah." First convert. For the first 3 years, or rather less, of his mission, the Prophet preached to his family and his intimate friends, while the people of Makkah as a whole regarded him as one who had become a little mad. The first of all his converts was his wife, Hazrat Khadija, the second his first cousin Hazrat Ali, whom he had adopted, the third his servant Zayd, a former slave. His old friend Abu Bakr also was among those early converts. Beginning of persecution. At the end of the 3rd year of Prophet Hazrat Muhammad, peace and blessing of Allah be upon him, received the command to arise and warn, whereupon he began to preach in public, pointing out the wretched folly of idolaters in face of the tremendous laws of day and night, of life and death, of growth and decay, which manifest the power of Allah and attest his sovereignty. It was then, when he began to speak against their gods, that Quraysh became actively hostile, persecuting his poorer disciples, mocking and insulting him. The one consideration which prevented them from killing him was fear of the blood vengeance of the clan to which his family belonged. Strong in his inspiration, the Prophet Hazrat Muhammad, peace and blessing of Allah be upon him, went on warning, pleading, threatening, while Quraysh did all they could to ridicule his teaching and deject his followers. First migration to Abyssinia. The first 4 years were mostly humble folk unable to defend themselves against oppression. So cruel was the persecution they endured that the Prophet Hazrat Muhammad, peace and blessing of Allah be upon him, advised all who could possibly contrive to do so to immigrate to a Christian county, Abyssinia. And still, in spite of persecution and emigration, the little company of Muslims grew in number. Quraysh was seriously alarmed. The idol worshipper tried to bring Prophet Hazrat Muhammad, peace and blessing of Allah be upon him, to a compromise, offering to accept his religion if he would so modify it as to make room for their gods as intercessors with Allah, offering to make him their king if he would give up attacking idolaters, and when their efforts at negotiation failed, they went to his uncle Abu Talib, offering to give him the best their young men in place of Prophet Hazrat Muhammad, peace and blessing of Allah be upon him, to give him all that he desired, if only he would let them kill Prophet Hazrat Muhammad, peace and blessing of Allah be upon him, and have done with him. Abu Talib refused. Conversion of Omar. The exasperation of the idolaters was increased by the conversion of Omar, one of their stalwarts. They grew more and more embittered till things came to such a pass that they decided to ostracize the whole family of Prophet Hazrat Muhammad, peace and blessing of Allah be upon him, idolaters who protected him, as well as Muslims who believed in him. Their chief men caused document to be drawn up to the effect that none of them or those belonging to them would hold any intercourse with that family or sell to them or buy from them. This they all signed, and it was deposited in the Kaaba. Then for 3 years, the Prophet Hazrat Muhammad, peace and blessing of Allah be upon him, was locked up with all his relatives in their stronghold, which was situated in one of the gorges which run down to Makkah. Only at the time of pilgrimage could he go out and preach, or did any of his relatives urge to go into the city. The men from Yathrib. They came from Yathrib, a city of more than 200 miles away, which has since become world famous as Al-Madinah, the city par excellence. At Yathrib, there were Jewish tribes with learned rabbis, who had often spoken to the pagans of a Prophet Hazrat Muhammad, peace and blessing of Allah be upon him, soon to come among the Arabs, with whom, when he came, Jews would destroy the pagans as the tribes of Ad and Thamud had been destroyed of old for their idolaters. When the men from Yathrib saw Prophet Hazrat Muhammad, peace and blessing of Allah be upon him, they recognized him as the prophet whom the Jewish rabbis had described to them. On their return to Yathrib, they told what they had seen and heard, with the result that the next season of pilgrimage a deputation came from Yathrib purposely to meet the Prophet. Quraysh dreaded what the Prophet might become if he escaped from them, and so plotted to kill him. Plot to murder the Prophet Hazrat Muhammad, peace and blessing of Allah be upon him. Soon the Muslims, who were in a position to do so, began to sell their property and to leave Makkah unobtrusively. Quraysh had wind of what was going on. They hated Muhammad in their midst, but dreaded what he might become if he escaped from them. It would be better, they considered, to destroy him now. The death of Abu Talib had removed his chief protector, but still they had to reckon with the vengeance of his family upon the family of the murderer. They cast lot and chose a slayer out of every clan. All these were to attack the Prophet Hazrat Muhammad, peace and blessing of Allah be upon him, simultaneously and strike together as one man. Thus his murder would be blamed on all Quraysh. It was at this time that the Prophet Hazrat Muhammad, peace and blessing of Allah be upon him, received the first revelation, ordering him to make war upon his persecutors until persecution is no more and religion is for Allah only. The migration, June 20th, 622 CE. The last of the able Muslims to remain in Makkah were Abu Bakr, Ali, and the Prophet himself. Abu Bakr, a man of wealth, had bought 2 riding camels and retained a guide in readiness for the flight. The Prophet Hazrat Muhammad, peace and blessing of Allah be upon him, only waited for command of Allah. It was the night appointed for his murder. The slayers were before his house. He gave his cover to Ali, ordered him lie down on the bed so that anyone looking in might think Prophet Hazrat Muhammad, peace and blessing of Allah be upon him, lay there. The slayers were to strike him as he came out of the house, whether in the night or early morning. He knew they would not injure Ali. Then he left the house, and, it is said, blindness fell upon the would-be murderers, so that he put dust on their heads as he passed by without their knowing it. The migration counts as the beginning of the Muslim era. He went to the house of Abu Bakr and called to him, and they two went together to a cave in the desert hill and hid there till the hue and cry was past, son and daughter of Hazrat Abu Bakr, R.A., and his herdsman bringing them food and tidings after nightfall. Once a search party came quite near them in their hiding place, and Abu Bakr was afraid. But the Prophet Hazrat Muhammad, peace and blessing of Allah be upon him, said, "Fear not, Allah is with us." Then, when the coast was clear, Abu Bakr, R.A., had the riding camels and the guide brought to the cave one night, and they set out on the long ride to Yathrib. After travelling for many days of unfrequented paths, the fugitive reached a village of Yathrib, whither, for weeks past, the people of the city had been going every morning, watching for the Prophet till the heat drove them to shelter. The travellers arrived in the heat of the day, after the watchers had retired. It was a Jew who called out to the Muslims in mocking tones that he whom they expected had at last arrived. Such was the migration, the flight from Makkah to Yathrib, which counts as the beginning of the Muslim era. Some events during first year of migration. People of Yathrib welcomed the Prophet Hazrat Muhammad, peace and blessing of Allah be upon him, and his companions whose leaving their houses for Islam. The name of Yathrib city changed to Medina, now the city of Saudi Arabia, a mosque built where the Prophet Hazrat Muhammad, peace and blessing of Allah be upon him, preached the Islam to the peoples. Many Jews were around the Medina city. Prophet Hazrat Muhammad, peace and blessing of Allah be upon him, gives the equal rights to the Jews community, and the Jews community promised that they would help the Muslim for defending of Medina.